Nathaniel Hummel, welcome back to Suit Up the Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, my friend. I'm honored to be here as always.
Well, as a refresher, would you mind giving the audience a brief biographical sketch? Because
For
we really
sure.
haven't dug much into your individual history since past two times you've been on the show. It's been in the capacity of co-host of the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast, which can
Yes.
we have like a 90s like thing on that in the future? Like do the 90s Men's Adventure Fiction
Yeah,
podcast
dude.
episode.
I really like that idea. That's a genius move. I can imagine the new intro that we'll have to do for that episode alone.
Poor Jared.
Um,
Come up with
yeah,
like some sick guitar riffs.
yeah, dude. This is a great potential here. But yes, I'm Nathaniel Hummel. I just love men's adventure fiction. I love pulp adventure. I love high adventure. You were posting about swashbucklers the other day, dude.
Yes.
That's where it starts, man. I just love it all. It's so cool to uh, grew up in a very rich history, I guess, or culture of Westerns.
Hmm.
From probably like 7 to 10 years old, I was watching Bonanza every day, dressing
Hmm.
like Little Joe. I was devastated that he was left-handed because I'm right-handed, so I couldn't be just like him. So that was kind of where it all started. Then I found James Bond, Indiana
Hmm.
Jones, eventually Uncharted, and it kind of all just fell into place. Um, Crazy to live in a world that has, I don't know how to put it exactly. It used to be so prevalent, like the
Hmm.
pulps,
Yes.
James Bond, stuff like
Hmm.
that. The things that inspired Indiana Jones were just like right in arm's length. Everybody
Hmm.
was kind of being so inundated with it in a good way. And now you go to like talk to someone about it and they're like, "Oh, so you just like Indiana Jones." It's like, "Oh man, there's so much more." It's like such a deeper well than just indie, although indie is a prime example. So that's kind of the background.
It is shocking how high adventure as a genre just
Yeah.
kind of trailed off
Yeah, what
in so many
happened?
ways. There's the Gabriel Hunt series that
Yes.
was put
Very
out by
good.
the same minds behind Hard Case Crime, and that has only six books.
I know, dude. Devastating.
And it's just like, why isn't this like a larger piece of the shelf? But adding to that wonderful selection, we have Treasure is My Trade.
Yes, sir.
The title
It
is
is.
so good. Like Nathaniel,
Thank
when
you.
I saw the title, I was like, maybe it's just that my name starts with the T. So I see a T on the title and I'm just like, oh, obviously the greatest book ever. But it just rolls off the tongue really well. It has like a good James Bondish flavor to
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
which I think is lacking from a lot of like book titles tend to be a little
Mm-hmm.
generic.
Mm-hmm.
So hats off.
Thanks. This is actually a very fun can of worms to dive into to start. Just right off the rip, we can get into it. This was only the title for the last 3 weeks or so.
Oh,
Up until
wow.
that point, the working title was Too Many Women, and it was gonna have, having read the book, this is the fun part, is there's only two women in the book.
Yes.
But right here where it says on the front, when she offered me the find of a lifetime, I couldn't say no because treasure is my trade. It was going to read something along the lines of, um, when I was at the gala at the event, I ran into two women, and brother, just one of these women would have been too many women, and that was kind of going to be it. And it's a really cool title that I'll have to use later
Hmm.
on, um, but it just only title like high kind of the first third of this book where it
Hmm.
is kind of like more noir in the
Yeah.
setup. So it is a really good noir title. It sounds like something
Hmm.
from like Shel Scott. His books always
Yes.
have some crazy. I think one of them
I
is like Bodies in Bedlam,
I was
another Strip
instantly
for Murder.
thinking this sounds like a Shel Scott novel when
It
you
sure
pitched that
does,
title.
dude. So we'll see. Maybe Nate Colt will go on a Shel Scott adventure. But actually, I've got this guy sitting right here too because it is a masterpiece. Fire in the Tall Grass,
Hmm.
similar to what he did with, I think it's is it Capstick, something like that. Peter Hathaway
Hmm.
Capstick did Fire in the or Death in the
Yes.
Long Grasses. Um,
Yeah.
So Treasure is My Trade actually comes from my all-time favorite author character duo is Stephen Marlowe and his Chester Drum character. And he
Hmm.
has a book called Terror is My Trade. And it's about Chester Drum, who's an international private investigator. And really, in some ways, I think I was already kind of in line to make Nate Colt an international
Hmm.
private investigator and had
Yeah.
been for a long time. And then I stumbled upon the Stephen Marlowe series, and it's incredible. I highly recommend checking it out. Dude, the suit up mug, top tier
Thank
stuff,
you.
man. Very impressive.
I have the one with the original logo with the silhouette of the guy just in the
Yeah,
suit, but that was
yeah.
buried deeper in the mug cabinet. So,
You gotta go with the closest mug sometimes. Um, but yeah, so I remember finding this. It was probably 2020, right during
hmm.
COVID, and I had a bunch of time on my hand, and I just found out about the absolute blessing that Hoopla and Libby are. So I connected
Yes.
to online library resources, and I found the first book in the Chester Drum series is The Second Longest Night, and it's a great book, one of my favorite books, and it sets the precedent for the whole series. Chester Drum is a hard-boiled former FBI agent who wants to set up his own shingle. So he gets
Hmm.
hired to find out his ex-wife was mysteriously committed suicide too.
Hmm.
So enough said. You can figure out the rest from there. But communism is involved, and he ends up going to Venezuela to track down the Venezuelan diplomat who is just a bad dude. And it kind of from there the series just keeps running with it. There's one's called Murder for Mecca or Mecca for Murder, and obviously it's going to be on the pilgrimage to Mecca, which no white person is allowed to be on. So they have all these like crazy. So it really is a beautiful combining of both the noir genre and the spy genre into these
Hmm.
awesome stories. And crazy enough, we've already talked about Shel Scott. There is a crossover book with Chester Drum and Shel Scott.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was Chet's 30 or 20th book and Shel's 20th book. They both just end up. So Chet's in Washington, D.C., and Shell's in Los Angeles. And they end up working a case about like Union strong arming from both sides of the country. And they end up flip-flopping and missing each other. And then the end they end up coming together. And it is crazy. It's a very interesting book because both Richard S. Prather and Stephen Marlowe wrote every other chapter. So it's honestly it reminds me a little bit of One Man's Treasure with the
Oh, thank you.
alternating perspectives of like, dude, and that's what's crazy about that book is that you wrote that all yourself. You didn't have a second author to give the personality. So very well done. I'm always
Thank you.
impressed when I think of that.
Thank you. I
Of course.
appreciate that. Definitely one of the things that I think stood out most from the book is I didn't think anything of it when I wrote it, and that's one of the main things people are like, this alternating POV. I'm like, well, damn it, now I have to do it again if I write a sequel.
Yeah, no.
I have to live up to
That's funny.
hype, which
Yeah.
that said, that's I give you huge kudos because Treasure is my trade. You're gonna have to live up to this.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
And
hearing that.
that's a tall order because let's talk a little bit about genre here. It does do that thing where it mixes a couple of different genres here. We have some
Yeah.
espionage flavor, some noir flavor, and some adventure flavor. And I think what is fascinating about that is they all have like this same root parent.
Hmm.
In the interview I heard that dropped today, people might be able to piece together. On the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast,
Uh-huh.
Luke made a comment about how you have like there's still that Western flavor that underlines through
Yeah.
as like the cowboy. I firmly believe that in like the grand American genres, the cowboy is the granddaddy of them all. And then you get
I
noir,
couldn't agree more.
then you get espionage. And
Yes, dude.
adventure is really just a slight tangent from noir. Because if you
Yeah.
track the different novels as they were written, really it is that 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 noir genre gave birth to what we think of with spies, what we think of with Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming was writing his best noir fiction in the first couple. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for really drinking from the holy well.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, I know, I believe, isn't the Maverick movie one of your favorite Mel Gibson performances?
Yes. Oh, so good.
Such a
Okay.
good movie. Yeah.
Like, yes, you are Nate Colt. As I'm reading this, I see your face, but I can also
Uh-huh.
100% see classic 90s Mel Gibson in
Thanks, dude.
Payback.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Mel
Great
Gibson
movie.
from Payback,
Great
I can
movie.
see running through some of Nate Colt's stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure.
again, chef's kiss on the character writing here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think that uh, Maverick, the original TV show from the 60s
Hmm.
with James Garner,
Oh,
and
so good.
then um the oh man, I'm having a also similar Bat Masterson. Have you ever seen that from the
I
60s as well?
haven't.
Very, very entertaining. He wears a cane and he has a
Hmm.
bowler, or he has a cane and wears a bowler hat, and he's got a cross draw with the quick draw. And every time you watch it, you're like, there's no way he's going to be able to outdraw him, and he always does. It's so sick. And he wears a tuxedo. So I love that about Maverick and about Bat Masterson is you have them like in the rough and tumble of the old West, but you got them
Hmm.
in tuxedos and you got them
Hmm.
gambling and you have them every once in a while they'll have to go do like real work because the gambling's not cutting it. So they'll put on their worker duds and they'll go on an adventure. So I do agree 100% that it is rooted in the Western because growing up, I always wanted to be a modern day cowboy, right? So of course that's the sort of stuff that I'm gonna write. And that's why I like themes of quick drawing.
Hmm.
I love having that play into the story. Just like to your point about the noir, adding in some snappy dialogue. I think I said
Hmm.
on a more recent episode of the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast, in a perfect scenario for me, I just want fun dialogue. It could
Yes.
be fun, smart dialogue, or it could be fun, dumb dialogue. Like
Hmm.
either way, as long as it's snappy and getting to the point and is enjoyable. I remember, I think it's Red Wind, um, one of well, I think that's Chandler, right?
Hmm.
He writes the one story, and the girl's got the gun on. Uh, it's Philip Marlowe, right?
Yeah, Marlowe's Chandler.
Yeah. Dude, and then we got Stephen Marlowe writing Chester Drum, so I'm all over the place here. Um, she's got the gun on him and she says, don't come any closer." And and like his internal monologue says, "We were both sitting down and neither of us were moving." It's like I love stuff like that. When you can like throw in a random line where it's like, "Why did she say that?" And he's like, I really don't know why she said that." So I love stuff like that when it's just like sometimes, dude, a really stupid line at the perfect time is just exactly what you need.
Well, and okay, so this is something I think you did really well with Treasures My Trade. There are a
Thank
couple
you.
of moments where Nate opens his mouth and says something that's absolutely dumb, but
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
context, and it's the context it works,
Hmm.
and he thinks that that's really smart and clever, and so you're just enjoying, this is really good.
Yeah, yeah. It's too funny. I think one of my favorite lines, and it's early on in the book, is when he's talking to Lady Drewmore and kind of getting the mission parameters to go and try and find this treasure, because treasure is his trade,
Treasure is his trade.
obviously. Exactly. And she's saying all these things, and he says something like, she kept giving really like interesting questions, but not quite enough. So I was gonna fire out my third of the night. And then he's like, ah. And it's just too funny. It's like, because I know it's also relatable too. Like you get into these conversations with people in real life and they're just saying things and they're just like not quite giving you enough to really like jump off from. So it's like, all right, ah. That's all I can handle in this conversation right now.
One of the things that Treasures My Trade does very well is it sets the mood and the atmosphere right from the beginning. And then it feels like it feels like parkour to a certain extent, where
Yeah.
we are in the speed run, going through the different obstacles and the different missions. And it's incredible. Like, again, hats off to you. It
Thank you.
never feels like it slows down to the point of and where inertia sets in.
Hmm.
The slower moments it has really give you that moment to catch your breath to keep on with the adventure.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a very high compliment. I my big concern with anything that I write, because I do love action, I do love adventure, I love high stakes and kind of high octane energy placed throughout, is that it is too much action, which, and this is the thing that um, I often wonder is I know I write for the stuff that I enjoy, right? My
Hmm.
mindset is I wanted to see something along the lines of the pacing and the action
Hmm.
of John Wick and Mission
Yep.
Impossible, where it's just like
Hmm.
you take a breather just to get to the next action sequence, so you're ready
Hmm.
to go. Um, but I've never very, you don't often see that in writing. And I remember
Hmm.
reading very early on in my life, probably like 10, 15 years ago, there was an article that said in books, you're very often not going to see running chases or car chases
Hmm.
because they're such a visual thing.
Yes.
Um, so they work much better in a film, right? Where you can actually follow the thing because you have the shots. So if you're describing a fight scene, a chase scene, um, either in a car or on foot, it can become very like hard to follow. And then my to combat that, because there's a couple parkour chases in the book, um, was to make them detailed, kind of give like clear
Hmm.
information so that you can really like track with it. But then you run the possibility of everyone being like, my mind is just melted from fatigue of trying to imagine these things. So th to that point, I have no idea how well that will be received, if it will be received well, if people are going to be like, oh man, finally a John Wick Mission Impossible book that I can read. But I don't think it'll change because I'm not writing to please like every single person. I'm writing
Hmm.
because that's the sort of stuff that I want to read and feel like there is kind of a hole in the market for. So,
I definitely feel like that beginning part where it's the chase at the
hmm.
castle is incredibly well written, very vivid,
Thank you.
and I could see it very well play out. So, in
Well, that's
terms of
awesome.
writing the clarity of what was happening and where people were in relation to each other, you aced it.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
That means a lot. I really appreciate hearing that. Uh, that's cool to hear.
So, what were the origins of Nate Colt? I know we discussed this, we touched on it briefly in
Hmm.
the conversation about Fighting Heart of Man,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
Nate Colt
Nice work. You're
has
prepared.
a story, but where
Yeah.
did the character originate?
Um, Funnily enough, I actually, in the episode of the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast that just dropped, we kind of dove into this. That episode was back and forth from Luke and I, him talking about who's kind of the backbone and the inspiration for Noah Redford, his series character, and then me for Nate Colt and my series character. And truthfully, what happened was for the longest time, I was kind of locked into special forces, military mindset. And I really thought that that was kind of the plan God had for me in my life. And then I realized that I'm like a gregarious guy who loves people. So, like, probably killing them for a living might not be as cool as I'd always imagined that it would be. So, luckily, I had that happen. One of my really good friends joined at 17 in the army, and he said he just sat on a hill for 4 years and did pretty much nothing. And he was very disillusioned after that, which I'm glad I was able to skip
Hmm.
straight to the disillusionment without having to go into the military. So good to get that out of the way without being massively disappointed. So that kind of started it all, like very much thinking like, oh, special forces is so cool. And then that's kind of when I ran into, as a kid, for some reason, my parents were like, Indiana Jones is too intense too early on. So instead of watching the movies, they gave me the novelizations of them. So I had
Oh,
the three books. So the first thing I ever knew of Indiana Jones
oh,
was like the Scholastic Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, and
Last
I'm
Crusade.
yeah,
I will
thank you. I
have
was
to
gonna
shoot you a picture. I have a copy of the Scholastic Last Crusade
too
novel.
cool. And they've got the inset pictures, like the glossy
Hmm.
pictures in the middle, dude. That was the stuff I would just literally for days just sit there looking at the pictures and reading the books. Very cool. Interesting to have that be my first interactions with Indy because they
Hmm.
do give you a lot more information into his mind in the books
Hmm.
because it's a book. That's what you have to do. Um, so that kind of started it, and then after that, I found out about James Bond. I locked onto that. It was so cool. I think it
I have to
was.
ask, which was your first Bond film?
That's a great question. I think so. I don't hate me. I have not seen any Roger Moore Bonds.
That's okay. It's allowed.
I have somehow also not seen the Timothy Dalton Bond, which everyone says
You're
is,
missing out.
yeah,
You would like them a
That's Luke's
lot.
favorite Bond. I gotta track him down. And I've seen a handful of the Pierce Brosnan ones, and I've seen
Hmm.
almost all of the Sean Connery ones. But I think the first one I ever watched was Casino Royale, and just
Mm-hmm.
dove right into Daniel Craig's Bond. And dude, this is like a very vivid memory for me. It's early morning. we're on a family trip to the local Costco. Somehow, as you're walking past all those big TVs right on the opening, the trailer for Quantum of Solace is playing, and it has the rooftop chase scene. And
Hmm.
what is it? Milan or Venice or something in the
Yeah.
beginning, and they're on the terracotta roofs, and then they go into that really big chapel area that's getting
Yes.
repainted. And I
Hmm.
think the end of the trailer is the scene where he grabs the rope, grabs his pistol, and turns around and does that sick shot right into the camera. And I hadn't seen any Bond up at that point. But
Something
I was just
awakened
locked in
within
there.
Nathaniel.
Yes, dude. I was like, oh, wait, you can have a character hanging from a rope because his foot's stuck, and then he just shoots the guy. That's so cool. So I ended up, after seeing that, made a duct tape shoulder holster, just tied some string
Mhm.
together, wrapped it in duct tape, wore it everywhere. And then that was probably 2010. I think it was like January of
Mhm.
2010. And I went to my friend's house to spend the night before going to church. It was snowing outside, and he had just downloaded the demo for Uncharted 2. And
Mhm.
that was my first introduction to the character of Nathan Drake. We played that all night long, and then we ran around the house shooting at each other with toy guns that we had. And that's where Nate Colt was born, because my friend created his character, who I'm trying to convince him. He's a pretty decent writer. I'm trying to convince him to bring his
Ooh.
character, Bing Callahan, back. We can have
Mhm.
some crossovers.
Having a sick name is like the first step in
Yeah,
being an
dude.
adventure hero.
It's all you need. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where it started, was like Indiana Jones, James Bond, and Nathan Drake all kind of
Hmm.
coming together in my mind and being like, man, I got to do something with this. And then it was just hours and hours outside in the backyard playing, creating these characters. Every Easter, Good Friday at my church, we'd have a Good Friday service, or we'd have a Maundy, Thursday service as well,
Hmm.
which is supposed to be like the Last Supper. So
Yeah.
Thursday night, we'd go to the service, then we'd go back to my friend's house and spend the night, because we had the Good Friday service afterwards. So we'll just get picked up at church the next day. And we would always come up with the craziest stories, like most harebrained things you would ever hear. So in the one year, Nate Colt ended up finding Jesus's tomb and stepped into a portal and went back in time. And on the other side, so the wall, Jesus lies on the
Yeah.
spot in the tomb, but there's a wall behind it. But blood seeped through the cracks in the wall, and on the other side there was a whole garden of plants that would give you eternal life. So just like crazy stuff, like the stuff that you come up with as a kid when you're just running around.
I think that we're getting breaking news on what the next Nate Colt novel
No,
is
no
going to be.
spoilers. Um, but yeah, that's how it goes. And the next thing you know, you're publishing Treasure is my trade. So it's been a very fun ride.
That's awesome, especially when it's a character that you've lived with for so long.
Yeah,
It gives you a better idea of who their voice is
right.
and just kind of their whole world. Like, and you've also written a couple of short stories in advance of this.
Yeah.
Plus, I have the notes here on Adventures of Wanderers.
Yes,
So
sir.
tell me, where did this web series start? Because Nate Colt is the man in it.
Yeah, he sure is. Um, this started, I believe it would have been 2013 or so. Uh, we'd been writing ideas, like we had these characters that we've been playing as, Nate Colt and Bing Callahan, for years, just always having adventures with them. And so we decided that we should try and write some stuff. So I had a script, basic ideas, and then my friend, he's probably 6, 7 years older than us. He was a youth group leader. He was in
Hmm.
school for filmmaking, and he said, "I've
Hmm.
got a project. Do you want to do an action movie? And you can play Nate Colt." And I was like, say less. Of course I want to do that. So it's me, 13, 14-year-old me with a white button up, unbuttoned way too far. I've got on a shoulder holster and a hip holster with some guns, and my friend Liam, who's playing Bing Callahan, who's his series character. And there's a map, but of course we're in the swamp fighting each other. So there's a big scene where he's like, "You got the map?" And I pull it out of my pocket, and it's literally just a ball of nothing. And he's like, "Oh no." But luckily, we were able to write in that we were ready right where we needed to be to find the treasure. So we avoided a catastrophe. um, so that was the first one. We made a sequel for that, for his final project, and that turned out really. He's a really good director and a filmmaker, so he's got a good vision. Um, but we were 15, 16
Hmm.
year old kids, so it's goofy. Very fun though. And then after that, we kind of rebooted it in 2018. 2018, I believe.
Hmm.
And every year since I have had one episode come out. And that's been like a a hill that I die on. Unfortunately, up until I teamed up with Luke and Veritas, it was always procrastinated until the last 3 weeks of the year. And everyone in the Hummel household was very distraught. My wife's like, dude, how did you wait till the last 3 weeks of the year again? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not going to get it out in time. It doesn't always come out in the calendar year for people on in England. So I really let them down. But everywhere else in the US, it always
The
comes out on
UK
December
audience.
31st. Sorry, guys. I let you down. Um,
So
yeah.
was that the Atlantis Excursion? Was one of
Uh,
those projects, or is that a
the
different thing?
That is
Because
actually a different thing. Dude,
do tell.
you've done some research. So I went to school for multimedia design was the first thing. I went to a community college in Delaware, and the way that it worked
Hmm.
was if you went right out of high school, completely free 2 year
Oh,
degree.
sweet.
Yeah, so I got a multimedia design degree, and then I transferred from there to Wilmington University, which is also, I think it's some sort of state school. But if you had a 3.5, 3.7, I don't remember, or higher, you got half your tuition paid for. So I
Wow,
was,
that's nice.
yeah, I was very anxious about, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something with filmmaking so I could always have that in my back pocket. Like maybe I never do it as a job, but
Hmm.
I'll always be able to have that knowledge to make
Yeah.
stuff, to make content, to keep the web series rocking and rolling. So my
For
first class
Nate.
there for Nate, dude, you got to keep him alive. My first class at Dell Tech was Intro to Design, and the idea was come up with a thing. It could be a business, it could be a company and experience, a product, whatever it is, and then you have to pitch it to us and you have to make some sort of advertisement for it. So I was like, dude, the Atlantis Excursion. And it's basically you go now this is proprietary information, so nobody can steal this idea because there is a really interesting trailer for it on YouTube somewhere. But you go as a rich person and you pay people money and you basically just go on a full adventure. Like they have
Oh,
characters at different places and help you go on this crazy adventure. It's basically like an escape room or a murder mystery, but it's massive in scope. Maybe you take like 3 days to do this adventure and you go through and you have the adventure. So I got a bunch of my buddies and we went into the woods right on the bay outside off of Delaware and got a bunch of cool stuff with sword fighting and gun fighting and made a really sweet trailer for it. I think I got an A in the class, so it worked out all right.
I was very impressed. I was like, I don't see anything else about the Atlantis Excursion. As I'm like going through, I'm like, should I try typing in the website? Like,
Dude,
I was tempted to.
I know. Wait, well, maybe this is something that needs to come back around. It needs to be a real thing that happens.
Okay, just an idea. Nate Colt is hired by the Atlantis Excursion to
Dude.
like investigate, like there's been some hush hush, something happened
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't supposed to happen. We
That's a
need
good
you to
idea.
figure out what's going on here.
That's There you go. Forget the other sequel I had planned. We're going with that one. That's a really cool idea. Yeah, that's
I
the brain. The cogs are turning, dude.
One of the things I think you did a really great job baking into Nate Colt's character is I've heard you talk about this before. We've talked about this on the show, trying to create an excuse and a reason, an engine for the adventure, something that
Yeah.
propels the character have to do that. I think
Hmm.
having him as this kind of international investigator, it
Yeah.
also is a really cool throwback because I think that this is something most of us today don't really think about because we have intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
But back in the 19, really up until the 1930s, you had organizations like the Pinkertons that were international in
Yeah,
scope,
dude.
and they were private contractors that they would just, oh, you need to know something about this thing. We got a guy. And they'd send the guy out there and he'd be wandering around in Vienna. Or
Yeah, dude.
Continental Op is
Hmm.
Dashiell
Hmm.
Hammett's stories where he's
Yeah.
hired by the Continental Detective Agency or something like that and never really given a name. So
Right.
it's really this cool throwback premise to a certain extent that
Yeah.
works really well today because again, he can do anything.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that was and this is kind of what it boils down to. And Luke and I have talked about that with Noah Redford, with Nate Colt. But you think even like you gotta give the mechanism for the adventure, right? So
Hmm.
Indiana Jones is an archaeologist, so he's going on stuff that no archaeologist would probably ever do. But he's the kind of man that you totally believe. Like he's
Hmm.
a scholar. He's also a rugged man of action, and it's just perfect. So then you have uh, one of my other favorite characters is a Louis L'Amour character, Ponga Jim Mayo. He is
Hmm.
a tramp sea freighter, so he's literally just traveling around the Indies,
Hmm.
Indonesia, Africa, figuring stuff out, and he's in a place that's so fraught with high adventure that
Hmm.
Major Arnold from England's Secret Service is like, all right, go do this job for me. It's like, of course I'm going to go do the job. So it's cool to have these characters who have things lined up. And I think it must have been in the Maltese Falcon,
Hmm.
um, watching that story, which it really is, if you shift it just a little bit, it is basically an Indiana Jones movie, you know?
Yes.
There's a MacGuffin, the
Hmm.
Maltese Falcon, and they go to find it. And something that I always am bummed about. And I don't necessarily know that the Maltese Falcon would need a sequel, right? Like it's
They're
a
writing a sequel.
masterpiece. Really?
So sorry, they're not making a film, but there's a Max Allan Collins and
Oh,
Hard Case
what a
Crime.
legend.
Hard Case Crime, they're gonna do The Falcon Returns or something like that.
That's
It's
so cool.
an authorized sequel to
That's
The
awesome.
Maltese Falcon.
That's great news. But I think about that because
Hmm.
that's the whole concept, kind of like feathered in throughout that is, all right, they hired a private investigator to find the Maltese Falcon in the first place. And so that's like, dude, he went to Egypt, he went all over these places finding this ancient treasure. So that kind of, I guess, watching that in high school or something like that, that kind of got the gears turning. It's like, all right, well, if someone is a private investigator, and we go back to this long legacy of noir from
Hmm.
Chester Drum, Shel Scott, Chandler, uh, Dashiell Hammett, line all those guys up. You look at this, all right, these guys are good at solving clues, finding clues, solving riddles, putting two and two together. All of the things that you do to find a missing person or solve a
Hmm.
murder are also the things that you do for a 2,000-year-old treasure. So then I was like,
Hmm.
all right, well, if they're good at that, and it doesn't even for Nate Colt, I'm not sure which one is true. Maybe he was good at finding treasure, and someone's like, "Oh, my sister went missing. Can you find her
Hmm.
too?" And he's like, "I don't know. It's less than 2,000 years old. I'm not interested." But then he ends up doing it anyways. Like you never know what could be the
I
cause.
I don't know
So
how to feel about Nate's first question is how old is she?
she's not 2,000 years old. I
Deal
can't be a part
breaker.
of it. So I think that you kind of get to that point where it's like, all right, well, this makes sense. If he's
Hmm.
good at finding lost things, he's good at finding any lost thing. And I think that's even something that's kind of hinted at as a line in Treasure is My Trade. She says something like, "You find lost things." He's like, "Yeah, but it just depends on what it is." So I think that that was kind of the first, like, all right,
Hmm.
the wheels are turning. You can just find stuff.
Have you created like a series Bible slash canon of Nate Colt's story
Yeah.
at this point? Because you have generated with the Adventures Wanderers, Nate Colt has a history. How much of that is canon for as you write the
Um,
novels, or are they kind of in their own individual universes?
that's a really good question. So far, and to my acrobatic delight, I have chosen to make everything in the series canonical, which
Yes.
has been very interesting to work through. What's really
Colt's
interesting is
canon.
Colt's Canon, the next book. Um, uh, the moral complexity of a character like Nate Colt
Hmm.
harkens back to. Now, this is a spoiler for the web series, and to be 100% honest, the web series is decent at best. There's some really like high quality stuff, but a lot of
Hmm.
the production quality is poor. Um,
I would say a lot of it is above average, like
oh,
just
thanks.
in generally speaking, like
I appreciate that.
genuinely enjoyable to watch. I was seeing so, especially it's cool to see how the overall team progress and production value has
Yeah,
gone up as the
yeah.
series has gone on. I did kind of just a marathon through half a
Dude,
dozen of
very,
them earlier
very impressive.
today, and I was like, wow, like we see these huge leaps of like the
Yeah,
quality gets better each time.
it sure does. The first season to the point where I thought about taking it down because it is. I have a lot of the stuff from the Adventures of Wanderers and kind of my like professional video reel, like the
Hmm.
later stuff, especially some of the acting stuff
Hmm.
is on there. But I don't want anyone. It's linked to my YouTube, and then they go back through and like, oh my gosh, what happened in 2018? This is horrifying. But it's a full story. There's some loose threads, and it's hard to follow sometimes. But there's a full story, and that story is Nate Colt is hired for a job, but it's actually a setup, and there's a $5 million bounty on his head. So the first season, very chaotically goes through him figuring out who's behind it, and then it's revealed that it is his estranged uncle, who uh, he finds out at an early age is, well, first of all, he's the head of his uncle is the head of special operations for the French Foreign Legion. So
Hmm.
Nate's father dies when he's around 18 or so, and he immediately goes with his uncle Cadogan and works with him as an operative for the special operations branch of the French Foreign Legion. Because you got to have your
Yeah.
adventure hero has to be in the French Foreign Legion.
It's
So,
like instant ultimate cool points.
yeah, dude, it's the unwritten rule. So that happens, and then it's revealed to him that his uncle has actually been double dealing with a syndicate, and
Hmm.
the reason he's been doing that is because he's responsible for Nate's father's death. And so that opens a whole can of worms, and then that translates to the current timeline where Nate's trying to figure out this bounty, and his uncle needs him for a job. So he hires him for a job, and it's two. So basically, it was 3 seasons just to set up a sick treasure hunt. But I had to build the world. And the treasure hunt is there's a supposed Nate's father was on to this ancient material that was
Hmm.
indestructible. It was some sort of very small concentration of a metal type of substance. And it's indestructible. It was what they used to build the pyramids, to cut through stone and stuff like that. All sorts of different things throughout history. I can't remember the line exactly. And now his uncle wants it, and that's kind of like where things get iffy. To your point of the production getting better and better, we have filmed season 3, episodes 2 and 3, and we
Oh,
filmed those
sweet.
in November of 2024, so
Hmm.
4 or 5 months ago now. And it is, I can confidently say, the highest quality stuff we've ever done. The issue is with this sort of filmmaking, and like you said, you can see the growth of the crew, and
Hmm.
also probably most likely the growth of me as a director. We really have gotten it down to a formula, but the problem is we all are adults now, and
Yes.
I moved three-ish hours away from everybody. So
Hmm.
I'm in central Pennsylvania, and they're all in Delaware. My in-laws have a 44-acre farm kind of right in between us. About It's like
Hmm.
45 minutes to an hour from me, and about two
Okay.
hours from everyone else. So
Yeah.
we meet up there, but these are people who are just taking a weekend to do this, and there's probably like 10 to 12 of them, and
Wow.
we're not making money from it
Hmm.
yet. Hopefully, we will eventually. But they're literally just coming up for 8 to 12 hour day. So
Hmm.
to take the time to write on a slate, scene one, take three, and clap that, and then get the audio and the video going is very, very time consuming and would totally kill production. And one of my teachers, he's a bastard because this has ruined my life many times, said no one uses on location audio anymore. So it's not that important. Just do ADR. That's what
Oh
all the
no.
movies do. So every time I'm thinking like, all right, well, we'll run the mic and I'll use that for sure. But that teacher said ADR is the way to go. So that's always enough in my mind that I'm like, don't slate anything, just shoot. So I've got all the audio and I've got all the video, but I have absolutely no way other than spending probably 4 hours of my time figuring out which audio goes to
Hmm.
which video. But it is very high quality. There's more more treasure hunting, really kind of getting into that. There's an ancient tome that Nate has to steal from a crazed war criminal, one who actually shows up in a name drop in Treasure is My Trade, Konstantin Ivanovich.
Nice.
So it's pretty interesting. I think treasure, and we talked about this on the first 1 or 2 interviews that we did, either on the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast or here, where we talked about how treasure hunting is like so alluring and so interesting
Hmm.
because it marries like the masculine urge to explore and find something that's never been found before, but it also takes it to a cultural relevance of this has been found before, but it's been lost to time, and we
Hmm.
have to go and find it again and reclaim that either for the fortune or for the glory or just for history. And I think that there's something innate to all of us that really see like an Indiana Jones type of character. And we're like, oh man, how cool would it be to find like the lost remnants of a civilization? This is just like
Hmm.
crazy to think about. So that's always been very much on my mind. And funnily enough, as soon as I made the first Adventures of Wanderer stuff, I was getting comments like, oh, this is just Nathan Drake. This is a Nathan Drake ripoff. And there is no treasure hunting at all in the whole entire web series. There's like hints of it, but it's just I think it's everyone's starved for kind of the high
Hmm.
adventure gunslinger
Hmm.
swashbuckler archetype. So to bring that in to any degree, people are like, oh, that's Nathan Drake. It's like no, there's layers. There's a bunch of really cool pulp and men's adventure fiction from 100 years ago that have
Hmm.
characters like this. They're just adventurers by trade. Um, so to be any part of that legacy is an honor that I don't take lightly.
It also has a very serial feel to it. I think that
Yeah,
you
for
see that
sure.
with the Adventures of Wanderers. Definitely, you kind of get that vibe of like the
Uh-huh.
serial cinema. But in Treasure in My Trade, you get that vibe too, where it does a great job of doing the we have this adventure set piece, catch our breath. Next
Right.
adventure set piece, catch our breath.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if you mind if we spoil what the MacGuffin of the story is,
No,
but
go for it. I think
the
it's in the trailer, the live action trailer. I spoil it, so.
the scrolls of Socrates. Like again,
Yeah.
what a great it's picking the artifact is like an actual decision making process
Yeah.
when writing an adventure story. How did you get to that decision?
That's a great question. To be fully, completely honest and open, this was written in a slew of writing. I've talked about this a handful of times, but Pulp Pipe and Poetry, Frank
Hmm.
Theodad over there in October, I think he wrote it in August or July, and I only read it in October, because that's how bad I am at checking my email. But he posted a, a editorial called The
Hmm.
Pulp Work Ethic, and it just fired me up. I was sitting out in my shed by
Hmm.
myself, smoking a pipe, um, when I read this, and it talked about how these guys just they didn't overthink it. They just wrote, and I had
Hmm.
written a lot, but never anything to like a complete story. So I sat there right after reading that. The pipe went out because I was just on my phone furiously typing. I wrote a 2,000 word short story, which is You're Welcome, Ralph, which made an appearance in Fighting Hard a Man. And from that moment on, I think it was probably 2, 3 months. And then I met Luke through
Hmm.
Instagram, and he read You're Welcome, Ralph. He's like, man, this is great. You need to write more. And I was like, yeah, I do need to write more. So from October 2023 to October 2024, I believe I wrote 200,000 words in that span
Wow.
of time. And it was mostly because I have a 45-minute drive to work, and I
Hmm.
was just talking into my voice recording app on my phone, which is able to dictate and turn it
Hmm.
into text. So I probably wrote, I think it was 18 short stories and
Wow.
two 50,000 or more novels in that time. Um, and some of them are treasure hunting, some of them are spy fiction, some of
Hmm.
them are just like pure noir. Some of them are the marriage of all three, which is probably what I like the most is slipping in kind of all elements that I can. Um, so I think that I was writing this, and I'm not sure about the legality of it, thinking about it, because I don't know how I came up. I don't even think I knew that Socrates didn't write things down. And so I must have said Socrates wrote scrolls. And then when I got home, I saw that he didn't write scrolls. And I was like, oh, well, that's not possible. And I was like, unless it is possible, and that's why it would be worth looking for. So that was kind of the mindset. It's like, it is tough, dude, to come up with a good treasure, because then you can either try and go off of something historical, which has probably already had some sort of treasure hunt already written about it, or you come up with something else, and then you have to work hard to come up with the lore of a new historical event. So
Hmm.
it's very, very complex. But then you can do something that's like, oh, this makes a little sense, like Socrates. might
Mhm.
maybe at the end of his life was like, all right, I better write this down. This is pretty good knowledge. Someone needs to be able to read it. Plato's gonna mess it up in the retelling. Write this down quick. And then then Nate Colt had a cool adventure because of it. So I think that was kind of the background for it.
I also want to give you good kudos for writing interesting female characters in the
Thank you.
story. That when you're writing an adventurous story that, let's face it, appeals to primarily a male demographic,
Hmm.
it's really easy to get stuck in making them just the Baby-Rama, or
Yeah.
they're just kind of there because it's like a James Bond movie and you need the
Yeah.
chick in the story. But you do a
Yeah.
good job of writing characters who actually have a purpose in being there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Um, Jackie has actually become a favorite of mine. I really enjoy her character. In fact, there's a 10,000 word short story about her and
Oh,
Nate having
good.
another adventure. Yeah, so she will make a multiple reoccurring appearances. It's This is the other thing that is layered back to the Nate Colt, The Adventures of Wanderers being canonical, is his uncle mentions that he has a wife of some kind. And so that for any sort of romantic interest in writing characters and stories has become an absolute ridiculous minefield of trying to figure out the timeline for all that stuff of when he got married, when this book takes place, how old is Nate Colton Treasure is my trade, how old is he in the Adventures of Wanderers web series. So every I don't want to,
Hmm.
I guess, relegate any of the female characters to like, okay, she's
Hmm.
here for solely romantic purposes. If there is some sort of like flirtation or back and forth between them, I think that that's engaging and entertaining. But I also don't want to be like, all right, this part of my manual of my formula says there has to be a romantic interest at this part in the book, so I got to slide someone in here. So that's why Jackie is very much her own person, an
Hmm.
acquisitions artist, as it would be,
Hmm.
as her card says. So she's a really cool character, and Lady Drewmore also very interesting. And no spoilers, but if you read the end of the book, you'll know that she's going to make another appearance as well. So, uh, and maybe that's when there will be too many women.
There'll be too
Who
many women.
knows? Oh,
Well, and I feel like anytime there's the flirting in it, it feels very much in that, for lack of a better term, recreational, where it's, oh,
yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
good-looking people that enjoy witty dialogue between each other. Ha 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 ha.
Yep, the best kind of flirting, in my opinion, recreational. Yeah, I think and this all comes back to Shel Scott for me.
Oh,
It's
yes.
hard. Shel Scott is he's not my favorite character and he's not my favorite book series, but for pure entertainment,
Hmm.
I've read his books and laughed like listening to the audiobooks aloud for a very large part of the book series. And it's because of his interactions with women. Richard S. Prather just knew how to write those interactions so well. I think there's one book where it's just too funny. I guess he's in the middle of a case, but things aren't breaking right. So he's feeling lonely. So he invites a lady over, but she's busy, of course. And so he goes to the next one who's also been in the story and he invites her over and she's like, all right, I'm coming right over. She gets over. First thing she does, goes straight to the bathtub. So he's got this beautiful woman in the bathtub and he's like got his plan set up. And of course the doorbell rings and it's not even the first lady he called. It's a third lady who's a reporter who has breaking news for him about the thing. And he's like, oh boy. So he's trying to play off while the bathtub's running, talking to this lady. And then, wouldn't you know it, the third lady comes right into the door and he's sitting there just working really hard to try and figure things out. Earlier in the book, like a couple pages earlier, he stepped into the tub because he was so excited to see the one girl, his whole entire pant leg soaking wet. So there's footprints tracked around his carpeted room. It's just like absolutely crazy. And all of this is feathered into a very complex and enjoyable
Hmm.
noir caper. It's just like to even come close to anything like that. I don't know that I could write anything like that because it's just so harebrained. But every time I write the scenes of Nate Colt interacting with women, there's a part of me that's like, all right, what would Shel Scott say? And how do I say it in a better way so Nate's not as stupid as Shel Scott can be? Um, but yeah.
Nathaniel, I've already asked you before about your writing routine, so I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. What do you currently have on your reading list? What are you
Ooh,
reading
that's a
right
great
now? What
question.
are you looking forward to reading next?
Oh man, that's a that's a heavy hitting question. I have been my reading time is very low for actual book reading, and it's
Hmm.
unfortunate because I love reading a book. But I have not figured out the balance
I
of
count audiobooks too, FYI, as actual reading.
yeah,
To
for
be
sure. I
clear,
I also count those as actual reading,
making
which is
sure
good.
here.
Very good to hear. But for actual paper books, every time I sit down to read a paper book, I get I don't know. I'm not a very anxious person, but for lack of better term, a wave of anxiety washes over me, and I think, man, I could be writing right now. Or
Yes.
there's those those 18 short stories and two novels that have the bones, but have not been gone over a second time, have not been fully
Hmm.
edited. Because I don't know if you've dictated anything into your phone, it gets probably 12% of everything you write completely wrong.
Uh-huh.
So it's a very, very challenge. In fact, 2 or 3 months ago when I was going through Treasure is My Trade, it it was not where it needed to be, and I probably added about 5,000 to
Hmm.
8,000 words to it
Yep.
of just making things clear. So very, very exciting time to write. So my book reading, I have sitting on my bedside shelf actual books. A assignment book series, which is the Sam Darrell character
Hmm.
by Edward S. Aarons. He is a really cool character. He's known as the Cajun. He was
Okay.
kind of one of the Bond clones, but there's
Oh, interesting.
44 books or something.
Oh,
So
wow.
he's a tall, handsome devil of a man who
Sounds like
comes from,
fun.
yeah, he comes from the bayous of, I think it's La Péché Rouge or something like that in New Orleans. His grandfather was a riverboat gambler. So this is in the 60s, 50s, 60s, when he's the CIA's best man. And those books have perhaps the most, if you think Treasure is My Trade is fast paced, the Sam Darrell books have like a breakneck pace. And
Wow.
it's somewhat reminiscent in my mind of like the Ethan Hunt Mission Impossible stories where
Hmm.
Ethan's always reacting to things and he's never kind of like ahead of the thing until you realize that this has been his plan the whole time. But Sam Darrell never gets ahead of it until he solves the case. So it's literally just crazy stuff. So that's sitting there. There's one of those. I've got two Alistair MacLean books, Force 10 from Navarone
Mm.
and The Guns of
Nice.
Navarone.
Nice.
Um, so that's the paper stuff that I've got kind of on the docket. As far as audiobooks go, I have been just chewing through stuff. I'm a driver, so I drive 9 to 10 hours every day, and I've been listening to a lot of Louis L'Amour. Right now, I'm
Hmm.
going through Lost Treasures Volume 2, which
Hmm.
is really interesting. There's been some crazy, just like high adventure stories in there. Some
Ooh.
really like very clearly men's adventure fiction stories. Um, and some there's one that's like the 1400s in India, and the
Ooh.
guy was like a gifted carver of wood and ivory, but the Indian lord of the area cut off his hand because he was romancing his wife in some way. Very, very much like a John Smith coded story.
Wow.
Um, and so it was his right hand, which was his dominant hand. So he spends the rest of the book learning to sword fight with his left hand. So he's gonna sneak into this castle and kill the Lord of India. Um, but the book never got finished, dude. It's literally just
Um,
like 3 or 4 chapters, and
hmm.
then another 3 or 4 chapters that were kind of like this is the getting the ball rolling, and he just pulled off of it. So huge, huge loss there. Per your recommendation, actually, I think it was like a secondhand recommendation on Instagram because I think you just got the arc for the sequel. For
Hmm.
I just listened to Assassins Anonymous, which is
Yes.
really good, really
Hmm.
enjoyable book. Other than that, I don't know. It comes in waves. I listen to so many different things. I just added my Hoopla account resets at midnight tonight, so I have to use my 5 borrows before the clock strikes. So I just borrowed the I think it's the 23rd book in the Matt Helm series by Donald
Hmm.
Hamilton. And Matt Helm is also one of my favorite characters. He's a really enjoyable first person narrative. Also an answer to James Bond, but he's more
Hmm.
of a gruff and gritty character. Everyone always thinks of the Dean Martin movies that came out in the 60s, but those are not at all the same.
They just went for some kind of brand recognition, which is astonishing.
Yeah.
I
I don't
do
know what
say
happened there.
I've read the first Matt Helm book. I should give more of them a try. They definitely felt more of an era in a way
Hmm.
that the Bond f books, for whatever reason, never have to me.
Yeah.
But I love the little note is that when he retires from like his secret job that he had before doing things that not people, nice people don't do, he writes westerns. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
dude.
what a fantastic little touch to have.
Yeah, yeah. That is a nice touch. I remember what's crazy is Donald Hamilton also wrote Westerns.
Hmm.
So I wonder if he really is Matt Helm. Um, I would say definitely go back in because Death of a Citizen, the first Matt Helm book, is in my opinion the worst of the series.
Okay.
Very much not as much fun as you'd like it to be. I think my favorite off the top of my head is the Ambushers,
Okay.
and Matt Helm gets sent to they don't give you the name, but it's a South American company that's or country that's run by a dictator. And he goes in there because he's a sniper, and
Hmm.
the resistance forces are going in to take this dude out. So he snipes the head guy and helps just provide covering fire for like half an hour while they rout these people. But then he goes down there to check everything out, and there's a nuclear missile sitting there.
Oh.
And so he's like, all right, well, my mission's not to do anything about the nuclear missile. Maybe I should, though. I don't want to get chewed out by the bosses. And so he comes back to America like, what the hell, dude? You should have done something about the nuclear missile. And so the whole entire story is him going to find out. He goes to like New Mexico, I think, and there's a sect of, now this is written in the 60s. So there's a
Hmm.
sect of leftover Nazis who
Hmm.
are trying to get this nuclear bomb. Um, and it ends with a really sick machete fight in the jungles, dude. So it's literally chock full of everything you want. It's got swashbuckling and gunslinging. In all of his books, Matt Helm is a sniper. He's also good with a pistol, but he is best with bladed weapons. So they do a really good job of slipping in some sort of swashbuckling, sword fighting, knife fighting through most of the books. So I can't. I would say I remember reading Death of a Citizen and being like, oh, yeah, this is okay, but this is not James Bond adjacent at all. This is like a weird American thug guy. I don't think I like this. And then I gave it a chance to listen to the second one, and he
The
is,
poor man's Jack Reacher is kind of what I was
yeah,
thinking that first book.
yeah, exactly. He's also the skinny Jack Reacher. He's like supposed to be 6'4" and a beanpole as opposed to 6'4" and 260 pounds or whatever Jack Reacher is. Um,
Nathaniel, this has been a blast. Treasures My Trade, when this episode comes out, is available
there you go, baby.
on Amazon. People should definitely check it out. Where can people go to learn more about you, your work, and what else you have cooking in the background?
Thank you so much for the pitch for Treasures My Trade. Super exciting to have a debut novel out there for
Hmm.
people to read.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on the podcast. You can find me at I should just spell it. It's Piedmonticus at Piedmonticus on Instagram. Um, that name is, I don't know why it's there. Luke thought it was P.I. Edmonticus, which ended up becoming a uh, alias for Nate Colt in one of the books. So thank you
There
for
you
that, Luke.
go.
So you can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on the Men's Adventure Fiction podcast every week on Wednesday, talking all
Hmm.
things within the genre. Sometimes we'll do inspiration for our characters. Sometimes we'll talk about the current things going on. Big characters in movies. Sometimes we'll talk about our episode 2 weeks ago was about how men need adventure and not having it in such a safe world that we live in can be really
Hmm.
stifling and really kind of let you down. So it can get deep. It can run the gamut of all sorts of stuff. I do that with Luke Goodish, L.S. Goodish, the author of Fire in the Tall Grass, Vipers and Red Rocks, a bunch of other stuff. Great dude. You can also find me on YouTube. It's just Nathaniel Hummel on YouTube, and you can find The Adventures of Wanderers. Like I said, maybe don't go back to season one.
I,
It's a wild ride.
and I will link everything in the show notes, including the Atlantis excursion, because who
Yes,
doesn't want
dude.
to see that?
Um, the last thing I would say is we have a really fun giveaway going for Men's Adventure Fiction
Yes.
May, which is also happening. I guess when this goes live, we'll be in the middle of
Hmm.
it. There's four people who are going to win prizes, and then I believe we're gonna try and publish the rest of the authors too. A really cool turnout we did with Veritas Entertainment, which is the production entertainment company that Luke and I have been working with. But we're doing a giveaway for that. You can win Treasure is My Trade, Fire in the Tall Grass. Actually, I got all three of them right here.
Look at those
Fighting
sexy looking books.
Fighting Art of Man, Fire in the Tall Grass, and Treasure is My Trade. And I think maybe I don't have it on me. You get a really cool knife from a company called Wesson Goods. But you can hop onto our Instagram and see all about that. You just follow Veritas Entertainment and Wesson Goods, and you're good to go.
Sweet. I'll link all of that in the show notes. Nathaniel, thanks again for
Awesome.
coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's always a blast.
Oh, wait, no, that wasn't